What's going on, guys? My name's Victor, and today I am going to talk to you about how I search out and find the cheapest flights that I can and then book them for my trips. There's a million different search engines out there for flights. It's hard to know which one's the best, and I've kind of sampled a few of them. My first go-to is Kayak. And if you don't know what Kayak is, basically you can search your flights, hotels, I think even cars, and then they have cruises. And it just lists all the different airlines and then where they found that deal, whether it's through the airline themselves or through companies like Cheapo Air or Just Fly, stuff like that. Now, other than that, you can also, like I do sometimes, I search Google Flights. Now, why would I go with Google Flights? Well, it's very helpful in the fact that if you're open to going anywhere in a certain destination, say you're like, maybe I want to go to Asia, you can say where you're leaving from. So I live in Reno. You hit Reno, the cheapest flights, and then if you have like a time frame in mind, say September, you can type that in, and then it'll show you the cheapest flights to all these major airports in Asia, which is super helpful because otherwise, like if you're on Kayak, you can try and search those airports individually for the dates that you want to go, but you know, it's gonna take longer and you might forget, oh yeah, like I didn't think about going to Vietnam. That would have been cool, but you know, I already booked this trip to the Philippines. They all have like their own purpose, and it's kind of fun to sample a lot of them. And so another one is called Hopper. What I like about it is it will pull up a calendar of the month and then it color codes the dates. So if it's green, it's got a little key at the bottom and it says $650 to $700 flights, and then orange starts getting a little more expensive. It's like $800 to $900, red $1,000 to $1,200, and then that can also help you determine which flight you want to do, and it can also help you determine which month you want to travel. Also, another good tip, you can do this on Kayak, and I'm sure you can do it on all these other flight websites, but you can choose a destination and then request to get notifications when the price changes. You might think that the price is gonna drop, and maybe it will, and you didn't notice when it did, or maybe it goes up and you should have booked it when you were looking. So I personally go with Kayak unless I'm just looking for the region, like I said with Google Flights, which is actually pretty fun, and you're like, wow, I did not realize these flights would be so cheap. Another feature that you can do on Kayak is, it says, I believe, explore the world, and you click that, and from your departing airport, and you can switch which airport it is that you're departing from, it will show you the cheapest flights at a lot of major airports in the world that exist out there right now. And so these range from all different types of dates, but you can narrow down the search results by typing in specific dates if you have a specific time that you need to go. That, you know, also has its benefits, but also sometimes it's a little finicky. Like it will say $700 flights to Tokyo, which from Reno is really cheap if you haven't looked into that, because Tokyo for some reason is just so expensive to go to flight-wise. And you'll click it, and then there's nothing actually on there that says $700, and the cheapest one you can find is like $900, and then one that has like a 24-hour layover in China or something, and you're like, why are we going to China first? I don't know. So that is another useful feature, especially if you're not dead set on the specific destination, and even if you are, then maybe you can find the cheapest time to travel. Also on Kayak, when you search a specific destination, you have an option to click explore the cheapest times to travel here, and then it organizes it, you know, however it's priced, but say it's cheapest in December. So it says December 1st through December 13th, flights range from $600 to $300, and it just goes down the list, and it's all funky and out of whack, but you find the time that you want to travel, or even just the cheapest one, go with that, check it out, see if it's right for you. But also, it's not just about money when you're booking these flights, because you gotta take in consideration time, because I think most people would agree that our time is much more valuable than our money. because, you know, time we can never get back. Is it realistic for you to fly to Thailand for super cheap and it's a 40-hour journey instead of a regular 20-hour journey just because you got it cheaper? Like, do you have the time to spare, and are you willing to spare that time to save $300-400 on a flight? So it's things like that that you have to consider before booking. Like I said earlier, when you're on Kayak and you click on a flight that you like and then it says all the places that it found deals for that flight, I almost always, for example, if it said it found that deal through United Airlines, I will close down Kayak, open up United Airlines myself, find those exact flights and book straight through them, because I don't want a middleman. I've heard some horror stories of people who book through certain flight booking companies and then they get to the airport and then they're like, sorry, we don't have your reservation, we don't have a booking for you. And like, you see it all the time on travel forums, so I'm terrified of that happening. I could not imagine doing that. Like, after you've booked your room and all these different things you're gonna do, and you spent however much it costs for the flight, and all of a sudden they don't even have the flight. So I don't even try and mess around with that. And then, you know, it's up to you if you want to do traveler's insurance, but also kind of read the fine print on the traveler's insurance, because, you know, you could be paying $75, but you can't even get a full refund if you can't go. It's more like if you came down with some crazy illness and then you couldn't go, then you might get a partial refund. So you just gotta read into that stuff and see if it's really worth it for you. And then another website out there that exists is Expedia. Sure, you've heard of it, but it can be good to look at the deals on there because you save money when you bundle your flight and hotel. They always post like these special deals, and actually some of them are pretty good. Like, you can find like flights and hotels to Hawaii for pretty cheap. That is when you bundle it. But that's again something that I've heard of, some horror stories where they get to their hotel and then they're like, no, sorry, there's no reservation under your last name. This actually happened to us in Hawaii earlier this year through a tour booking company when we went to our luau. It's not the same as a flight. They're like, oh yeah, you're not in here, and we always have problems with this said company, which was crazy because, like, I've booked through them a million times through other destinations like Japan and Mexico and stuff, and, you know, it always works out. So it's those middleman situations are, you know, you're risking it. Another option that you could go, but I don't expect you to get the best deal on flights, but if you're just trying to book a trip and make it easy, you can go to places. It's kind of like Expedia, but like, we booked our Japan trip. This was back when my wife and I first started getting into traveling. We booked through TripMasters, and so it was 10 or 9-day trip in Japan, and it books your flights and your hotels and your itinerary. So we went Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and basically all you had to do was then buy the train pass that it linked there for you, so you could take a bullet train to Kyoto, to Osaka, but then your flights were already covered and it just does it for one lump sum. But then when you're going to book it, it also says whether or not it's cheaper or more expensive if you change the day by 1 or 2 if your dates are flexible. If you're someone who's a little more paranoid and thinks that the man is spying on your stuff and trying to you know, raise prices and things that you're interested in, which may or may not happen, I don't know. You could use a private browser such as DuckDuckGo to try and cover your end and make sure people aren't raising the prices of these flights because you're interested in it. Now, I don't really do this, and I don't know if it really happens, but I've heard people talk about that. But yeah, if you just go onto duckduckgo.com and then go into Kayak, apparently, you know, that stuff can't or isn't being tracked, and it's more private, and, you know, so I don't know. If you're someone who's paranoid like that, just know that it exists. Now that we covered the websites that I primarily know of and have dabbled in, when should you book your flight? Well, I can tell you this right now, that most flights are going to be significantly cheaper during the shoulder season. And if you don't know what the shoulder season is, that's basically like the off season. Europe, for example, the shoulder season would typically, I would say, be in spring. That is when less people are traveling there and the weather's not as nice, so people don't go as often. And also kids are in school typically, and people wait to take their vacation time during summer because their kids are off, and now it's warm weather and people don't want to be cold when they're traveling typically. So that is shoulder season, and that really stinks because my wife is a teacher, so that means a lot of times that we are going to be traveling during the summer, so there's not much I can do there to get it as cheap as, you know, the flights could be, because I could be getting super cheap flights to Europe if we could just leave in September or October. And honestly, that would actually be pretty nice because Europe in summer is actually stupid hot in most places, and it's humid, just so muggy. So that's one way, travel in the shoulder season, not the peak season. And then another way is to book your flights on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I've found and I've read that those are typically the cheapest dates to book your flights. That means that you're departing on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and you're returning on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And that's not always realistic for a lot of people, especially if you have only a certain amount of vacation time and you're trying to get the most out of your trip, meaning you're leaving Friday night and then you're returning on a Sunday night, just because you want to maximize that 1 week if you work a regular 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job. But it does oftentimes lower the price of a flight up to $200–300, so definitely check that out. And honestly, a lot of these tips are just better if you have flexible dates. Alright, so next thing, if you live in a small city like I do, which is Reno, Nevada, that means that your flights are typically going to be priced higher because you will be experiencing a layover in bigger cities like San Francisco, LA, Dallas, New York, Chicago, etc. Now, the workaround for this is try and find the closest hub to you. Like in my case, it's San Francisco. It's about a 3.5–4 hour drive from where I'm at, so you can search flights departing and returning to San Francisco, and you could end up saving up to $400–600 per person that you're booking that flight for. It might be a pain leaving and returning from that main hub, which isn't the closest airport to you, but you will save a lot of money. And just ask yourself, is adding 4 to 8 hours to your travel time worth saving $400? Now, I know I said time is valuable, but at the same time, not many people, I would say, make $100 an hour, and you could save a lot of money. Just determine what's right for you, and maybe you don't have enough vacation time to burn on something like that, so use your discretion. This is exciting, but announcing my next trip, that's me doing an air drum roll. My wife and I are taking our next trip this spring to Thailand. First time, so excited. I have been wanting to go to Thailand forever, but it is so far away. It's like exactly halfway around the world from where we are, so it takes a long time to get there. Pretty much takes 2 days with the time zone change and how long it takes. But we are flying out of San Francisco instead of Reno, and we're returning to San Francisco. And yeah, so going to Bangkok and back, and it's going to be a 2-week trip, so that means we're gonna have to take a bus to San Francisco. But here's the reason why. I booked those flights through, I think, like China Eastern or whatever airline that is, for $600 each. You could not dream of getting that deal from Reno. Cheapest you'll probably find is like $1,100. So I saved us about $1,000 total just because we're leaving out of San Francisco. And luckily it will be spring break for my wife, and I can set my own schedule being a videographer, so we've got time. I let flights most of the time dictate where we're going, because I've been wanting to go back to Japan for a long time, but I don't want to pay $1,200 a ticket when I've seen them leave from Reno at like $800 a person. So it's like, I don't want to buy a trip to Japan when it's at its peak. So I'm just waiting for the right timing to go. So that's what I do. I personally am heavily dictated by the price of flights as to where we're gonna go. And then also the season. So that is Thailand's dry season from what I learned online. So I don't wanna go during monsoon season. I'm actually quite terrified of even a tsunami happening, but there's honestly no telltale for that. It's just random earthquake, I suppose. So hopefully that all goes well. But anyway, super excited there. And yeah, I looked on Kayak. That's how I found those deals. I was just looking at Bangkok. And so yes, this is a round trip from San Francisco, but that leads me to my next point, that round trips aren't always the cheapest option, especially if you're doing a Europe trip. You know, say you fly into London. Most people don't end up spending their entire week or 2 weeks, a month, however long in that one destination, especially when you're in Europe, because all those countries are so close to each other that, I mean, you're just like a 2-hour train ride from the next country. So people often travel around, and if you booked a round trip, that means you're gonna have to spend money traveling back and then waste more time getting on another flight to go back home. So our last Europe trip, we flew into Paris from Oakland. It's a hub for some European countries through Norwegian Air. When we returned, we came back from Madrid instead of a round trip in Paris. So Madrid to Boston to Reno. And that was a decision that I made, that I didn't want to go back to Oakland and then drive all the way back. It was gonna be a long trip. Our first Europe trip, we did a round trip to Dublin because it seemed cheap. And I was wrong, because we went, you know, all around Europe, and then we went from Paris back to Dublin, and we spent like a day and a half, because like after all that traveling and then time zone change, then you gotta go back to the airport, and then they ended up canceling our flight. It's just like one thing after the next, and then you ended up wasting all this time, all this money, you're buying airport meals, and just, it's unnecessary. I would heavily suggest that you try and figure out where exactly you're going first in that country or the region, and determine if a one-way ticket each place is going to be cheaper and more efficient. But for us in Thailand, we're only gonna do Thailand, and so Bangkok is obviously the main hub, and you know, there's another airport like Phuket, but I have not found any cheap flights to or from Phuket. So unfortunately, we will have to loop back to Bangkok to go back to San Francisco. I hope all of this helps. Those are my tips to booking cheap flights. People ask me all the time, and I just wanted to make this video to help you guys and hopefully get you guys to book your next trip, because I think some people are just a little timid of looking at all the flights, or they end up spending way too much, and they could have taken 2 trips for how much they spent on the one because they didn't know the cheaper ways to do it. If this helped you, leave a like. You can comment the cheapest flight you've ever booked and to where. That would actually be really cool. I would love to hear what you guys have to say on that. And then if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. I'm gonna keep trying to bring more video, photo, travel, all that content to you guys. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.